Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Des Roulette, and today I am coming to you with the Quarantine Stream Netflix edition. I wanted to put together this video to point out some TV and movies that I feel are worth a watch. So let's get started. We're gonna start with comedy. The first recommendation that I have to make, anybody who knows me knows this is coming, Hot Rod. Andy Samberg plays Rod, who is an aspiring stuntman, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I love Andy Samberg, Jorma Taccone, Akiva Schaffer. Those three, by the way, are The Lonely Island, and they also created most of the SNL digital shorts that took place while Andy Samberg was a cast member. Personally, I think that they are geniuses, and despite the success that they found with The Lonely Island, I still feel that they are tremendously underrated. Underrated hilarity, genius soundtrack and music placement. The editing in this film even is perfect. Hot Rod has actually been fairly significant in my life. This is a movie that I used to play for like dudes that were pursuing me back in the days when I was single, and I would say, if you get this movie, you understand me. So I don't really know if that's true, of course. I'm not nearly as funny as the creators of Hot Rod, but I just think it's so great. So, second recommendation, Scary Movie 2. So this was a movie that was also pretty popular, but I did want to expand a little bit on this one because I still consider the comedy of this film to be extremely underrated. It parodies The Haunting, The Exorcist, the Amityville Horror, Poltergeist, The Legend of Hell House, House on Haunted Hill, The Changeling, Hannibal, and The Hollow Man. Also, Tim Curry, Chris Elliott, David Cross, and James Woods have four of the best characters in the film. I really think that they are the major key in separating Scary Movie 2 from the rest of the Scary Movie film franchise. I think it still holds up. Next, The Other Guys, starring Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. Totally underrated cop comedy. I don't know if it was sort of misunderstood, or maybe it just came out at a time where it sort of flew under the radar. I think it's fantastic. It's another example of a really over-the-top, silly comedy film, a lot of big action sequences, but it has some really good running jokes and part actors. Also, Goon. So Goon is based on a minor league hockey player named Doug Smith, a former minor league hockey player who is played brilliantly by Seann William Scott. This film was written by Jay Baruchel and Evan Goldberg. Evan Goldberg, who co-wrote Superbad, Pineapple Express, This Is the End, The Interview, and Good Boys with Seth Rogen. He and Seth Rogen have actually worked together on most of Seth Rogen's career. They were childhood friends, and Jay Baruchel is actually part of that group as well. Goon is a comedy, but it's not a comedy in the same vein as Pineapple Express or Superbad. It is a little bit more slow paced. The comedy is slightly less obvious, but for if you're someone who's not particularly into sports of any kind or even hockey, you should probably still watch it. It does have some really good comedy moments with the team. It has some really good comedic characters, and it's an interesting story. Great film, really well done. It has a little bit of cult success, but I feel that that's a movie that's typically overlooked. There is also a sequel that's available now, so if you do watch Goon and you enjoy it, there is a Goon 2. This next movie is very well known, but it was kind of a box office flop, so I still think that it deserves a mention. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Scott Pilgrim is actually based on a series of graphic novels written by Brian Lee O'Malley, but the movie was co-written and directed by Edgar Wright, who's best known probably for Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz is one of my favorite movies of all time. But not only is Scott Pilgrim one of the most entertaining movies I've ever seen, it has this really unique storyline. The movie starts as a battle of the bands and revolves around music, but it kind of continues as like a video game. So the visuals are really cool. The music is awesome. The characters are kind of curt and over the top. There are a couple cringy moments in the film when Scott comes into contact essentially with the first X. There's like a dance number, like a music sequence that it kind of goes over my head, but if you can get through that scene, the rest of the movie is totally worth it. And there's a lot of really good comic moments in Scott Pilgrim as well as a fairly complex storyline that is just unlike anything you've ever seen before. Really good. I love that movie. Okay, so there are some other movies that I highly recommend that are slightly more well-known. You just might not know that they're available to stream on Netflix. So I'm just gonna kind of rattle those off as general recommendations. Drive, amazing film, amazing soundtrack, fantastic performance by Ryan Gosling, which is interesting because his character hardly speaks at all. He hardly has any dialogue. He doesn't even have a name, and he carries the whole film tremendously. It is violent. It wasn't anything more shocking than a gangster movie for me, for example, but maybe something that you should be prepared for. Either way, I recommend it. Great movie, one of my favorites. Speaking of violent gangster films, Goodfellas is also available to stream on Netflix now. Raging Bull is available to stream. Pan's Labyrinth, incredible film. It is subtitled. Guillermo del Toro chose to film Pan's Labyrinth in his native language of Spanish. He has done half of his filmography in English and half of his filmography in Spanish, but he is a native Spanish speaker. And I think that if Pan's Labyrinth had been filmed in English, it would have probably lost a lot in translation because it's a fantasy film and a lot of it is based on folklore, but still a great movie, not for kids. Avengers Infinity War is available on Netflix. One of the biggest movies in the world, but for those of you who thought it was only going to be available on Disney Plus, it is still available on Netflix, so get your watches in now if you don't have Disney Plus. All 4 Indiana Jones films are available to stream on Netflix. Good throwback there. Kingpin, Groundhog Day, Stepbrothers, The Shawshank Redemption, Bird Box was a great movie. Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 are available on Netflix. So you kind of miss like the beginning and the end, but you can get all the bulk movies in the middle in. Legion, Autopsy of Jane Doe, relatively unique horror film, pretty well done, and Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2 are available for streaming as well. So those are the movies that I kind of jotted down. Next we'll move on to TV and we'll start with documentaries. Evil Genius, if you're into true crime especially. Evil Genius is only a 4-part series, so you can get through it pretty quickly. It's based around the 2003 pizza bomber case, but it's really so much more than a guy just robbing a bank with a supposed bomb strapped to his neck. It's a truly complicated and diabolical backstory, and to me that's the much more interesting part. I personally love true crime, and it's just a crazy case. Next recommended documentary series, Tiger King. Wow. So this whole story sounds fake. Every episode is crazier than the last. It's presented as a documentary about this eccentric guy who owns a private zoo and a few other people who own private zoos, and the interactions they have with each other and their opinions on one another. Kind of seems like it's going to be based around rivalries. It's so much more than that. Like, honestly, if I heard this full story from someone, I would believe that it was made up. I would never believe that everything that happens in this case is true. It's really kind of mind-blowing to think about all the details of Joe Exotic and all the players in this whole story. And if I give you any details, I'm basically giving away the whole story. So that's why it has to be presented kind of vague. But I'm sure you've seen the hype around it. If you haven't watched it yet, you should absolutely watch it. Okay, next, another true crime, Abducted in Plain Sight. So this is the story of a 12-year-old girl in the Midwest in the 70s who is abducted by a close family friend twice. He marries her. He at one point poses as her father, and the issue isn't just that this girl gets kidnapped by this pervert who had manipulated his way into the family structure, basically. It's kind of like the way he did it and his relationship with her family and how everything is handled. It's also actually not a full series. It's an hour and a half, so I don't know why I put it in the TV category. I guess that should have gone in the movie category. Anyway, another TV series that definitely deserves a mention. So this is an informational series. It's called Explained. The episodes are only about 22-25 minutes. Most of the topics are still pretty light, just kind of fun and interesting. But season 2, episode 4 is called The Next Pandemic. This episode was released November 7th, 2019. So this was before coronavirus was even really established in China. But the whole episode talks about how many potential flu pandemics exist and how unprepared we are to deal with with another flu pandemic right now. It talks a lot about the history of flu pandemics, but it also gives a lot of information about SARS outbreak, which coincidentally came from a Chinese wet market as well. It uses a lot of computer generated animographs to sort of show how that spread, and even SARS was very contagious, but it wasn't nearly as devastating as COVID-19 has been so far. And SARS still killed about 10% of the people who were infected. It just has a lot of really interesting information. It was a little foreboding. Another informational series, Adam Ruins Everything. It's funny, it's kind of quirky and cute, a little bit more lighthearted topics about consumerism, a little bit about politics, but they present it in a silly kind of way. Also a little corny at times, but I enjoy it. I think Adam Ruins Everything's a great show, so I recommend that. Nailed It. It's a baking show about non-bakers, just regular people or aspiring bakers who don't really have much experience, who go on this show and all compete to win $10,000, and they have to recreate these really intricate desserts. It's just really funny. It just makes me laugh to kind of see what they're supposed to make and what they end up coming up with. It has a couple seasons. There are also versions of Nailed It in other countries if you don't mind captions. Okay, Selling Sunset. It's about luxury real estate agents in California. Doesn't really follow a storyline. It's a reality show, I guess, but the houses are really beautiful. You have your typical like petty characters, but a lot of that I believe is put on for the cameras. But I thought it was really entertaining, so I enjoyed it. I also really liked the Movies That Made Us. There's only a couple episodes, but it's a similar documentary series about some movies from the 90s. It's nice to kind of look back on movies that made an impact on me in my life at some point, and learning about everything that happened behind the scenes, how from the time that the script was written to the time the movie was cast, and all of the issues that production ran into while they were filming. They have an episode on Dirty Dancing, an episode on Home Alone, lots of good info. What else? All right, so those are kind of the shows that you might have overlooked. Now I'm just gonna do the rundown of a quick list of the other TV shows that are available and that I thought were really good and that I personally recommend. I'm gonna start with a show that I did not think that I was interested in. I watched the trailer when it first came out and I thought that it didn't really look appealing. And then I ended up seeing people post about it, get excited about season 2. So I ended up watching it, the show You. I thought it was clever. I kind of bought into the characters. I definitely followed the storylines kind of intently and went through seasons 1 and 2 really, really quickly, and now I'm anxiously awaiting season 3. It was definitely better than I expected. So if you're on the fence about You, I recommend that you watch it. Okay, other shows in general that are good. Get Shorty, the series, fantastic, streaming on Netflix. The Blacklist, great show. Ozark, obviously, a lot of people are familiar with Ozark, great show. Another season's coming out soon. Schitt's Creek, hilarious. People are starting to catch on to Schitt's Creek now. Almost all the seasons are available for stream on Netflix, if I recall correctly. The Politician, I thought it was a great show. The Haunting of Hill House, Twin Peaks, Parks and Recreation, The Office, Arrested Development, Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, fantastic show. Mad Men, Breaking Bad, The Good Place was hilarious. If you are a fan of true crime, Forensic Files and Cold Case Files, always a solid choice. I Am a Killer was also really interesting, and Don't F with Cats. Messed Up Story. That one is a much more sensitive series. It's about the case of Luca Magnotti. You might recognize that name if you are familiar with true crime. It's just kind of brutal. I mean, there's a lot of descriptive animal abuse. They don't really show too much of anything, but they do talk a lot about the person who committed some really disturbing crimes and how they ended up catching him. They do leave out a lot of sensitive information from the story, from the series, so it's not so bad that it'll make you physically ill, but if you choose to watch it, you should be prepared. Now we're down to our very last show, my very last recommendation. And if you know me in real life, or even if you follow me on social media, you probably know that this is coming. BOJACK Horseman. BOJACK Horseman is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's an animated series about a cartoon horse voiced by Will Arnett, who was a famous actor earlier on in his life. And this series starts with him kind of being washed up, not having worked in many years, and he's, you know, like an alcoholic and just kind of trying to work through his life the best way that he knows how, I guess. There's a lot of really profound moments. I mean, it's definitely the most serious animated show I've ever seen. There's moments that are just funny. There are a lot of jokes, a lot of running jokes, a lot of details in the show that are interesting, like in the background. The continuity is out of this world. The characters are all really great. Alison Brie also plays a significant role. Paul F. Tompkins, Aaron Paul, Amy Sedaris, Christian Shaw, and there's a lot of actors who pop up who will play themselves, and it's fun and entertaining that way. But the storylines do get a little dark. They touch a lot on relationships and sexism and alcoholism, substance abuse, depression, mental illness. This is crazy. Okay, so I still can't even talk about BOJACK. It's still pretty fresh in my mind because the series did just end. BOJACK continues to affect me. I'm just totally blown away by this show. You know, again, some episodes, some even full seasons are very lighthearted and, you know, just kind of silly and fun, and you just follow the storyline and enjoy yourself. But there are certainly times that it gets kind of dark, and there are a lot of deeper meanings folded in. I kind of love that it's presented as this animated comedy, but it is seemingly speaking to things that people don't often want to face. There's just a lot of depth folded into it, and I think that the show is very well done. It's kind of just in a league of its own. It was gonna make the list, even if everybody else who watches it completely dislikes it. And with that, we are done with our first edition of the quarantine stream / the social distancing playlist Netflix edition. The next quarantine stream will be Hulu, and I will also do an Amazon Prime edition. I definitely missed some things that I probably didn't even know were available, so don't be shy. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.